Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Wilmington Biz Talk from the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. I'm Vicki Janowski, editor of the Business Journal, and today we're going to be having a special guest to talk about the next leader for the New Hanover County Endowment, which is the incoming president and CEO who was named today, William Buster. And joining him will also be Spence Broadhurst and Hannah Dawson Gage with the endowment board to talk a little bit about why they selected William Buster and also what the next steps are now that we have a start date for a new head for the board. But before we dive into the conversation, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor, the Cape Fear Realtors.
Hello, I'm Ann Gardner, CEO of Cape Fear Realtors. Realtors support this program's efforts to connect our community in meaningful dialogue with actionable insights. Realtors are dedicated professionals who build strong, resilient communities and businesses. Work with someone you can trust. Work with a realtor. Learn more at capefear.realtor.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Wilmington Biz Talk. We are diving into the year 2022 and not easing into it at all, already having some breaking news. And if you are a Business Journal subscriber, you would have seen the news alert that went out earlier today, and that is that the New Hanover Community Endowment, which as many of you know, is the fund that was created from the sale of the hospital and stands at more than $1.2 billion, has now named its inaugural president and CEO. So today we have the opportunity to get to know him a little bit and spend some time finding out more about him. So the announcement today, William Buster will start as head of the endowment on March 1st. Right now, he's currently the Senior Vice President of Impact with Asheville's Dogwood Health Trust. And that's a name that we've heard over the past year for those who've been following the creation and formation of the endowment. He is from North Carolina, and we're going to ask him a little bit more about his background, also why he was drawn to put his name into the hat for the Wilmington position, and also what's next ahead. Helping us talk a little bit more about what might come up this year for the endowment is Spence Broadhurst and Hannah Dawson Gage, who are the board's chair and vice chair, respectively. So, kick us off, William Buster. Welcome to this talk, and it's nice to meet you virtually. Why don't you tell us just a little bit to set the stage here about why you were interested in this position and what really kind of drew you to applying for it through the national search?
Well, thank you, Vicki. I'm really pleased to be on with you all today. You don't often have the opportunity to have these kinds of resources in a community. And just like you were talking about being a Dogwood, I've been watching the formation of the endowment over the past year myself. And being in philanthropy, we across the country, we were watching this. This is a big deal in the field of health philanthropy. And so once it began to kind of put out information, the board began talking about the things that were important to them, seeing the ways in which they were listening and seeking out information from the community, and then finally understanding what some of the priorities were. There was no way that I couldn't apply for this opportunity. Didn't think, you put your name in a hat for things like this, but this was such an outstanding opportunity. You just wanted to be a part of the conversation so you could at least just share your information and learn more about what's happening there. So it was all of those things, and it being in my home state. I love North Carolina, and being able to kind of help our community and help these resources be deployed in the best way that we can is really what drew me to the opportunity here.
I know you say a big deal. I feel like over the past year, it's like one of those words you say over and over and over again. It's kind of loses its meaning. But when we say 1.2 billion plus, that's a large amount of money, particularly for a fund of this type and size, even if you're looking at nationally. So what could you say just coming into this position and what you've seen about how the endowment already has kind of been set up or its goals? When you look at it, what do you see as being kind of your approach to it, or your philosophy coming in?
Yeah. So all throughout my career, one of the things that I think is absolutely necessary, and I've always done it this way, is you don't do anything without creating partnerships. Though $1.2 billion is a lot, and then the millions of dollars that we'll put out every year will be significant for the community, it won't change the conditions ultimately just by itself. And so my approach is firmly seeking out partnerships, seeking out others who are going to help us do this work. Listening, being very intentional about listening to the needs is something that we're going to try to excel at. And then communicating clearly. It's important. Philanthropy sometimes can be, a black box, and so people don't really know what's happening on the inside. I want to be the type of organization that lets people know what's happening on the inside. This is going to be fun. This is going to be hard, and I want the community to remain excited about this over the next few years, because this is a few years process that we're going to do. We're going to have to take standing up this organization and getting and really truly spreading our wings. So that's my approach to it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your career in philanthropy, and where you're coming from?
Yeah, so originally born and raised in Kannapolis, North Carolina, right up the road a little bit from Wilmington. And I got into philanthropy. It's now about 21 years ago. My first opportunity was as a junior program officer with the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation, based in Winston-Salem. And luckily, the regions that I was over were places like Eastern North Carolina, Western North Carolina, all of Appalachia, the Delta. And so I got a chance to kind of work throughout the Southeast, especially in North Carolina, the state of North Carolina, in the bookends, as I call it. And from that work, and it was really focused on a lot of rural community development, rural engagement, supporting youth development. And it was that work that I did for several years at Babcock that got the attention of the Kellogg Foundation based in Battle Creek. And I was asked to go to Kellogg and lead up their national rural work. So I had an opportunity to go there in about 2007. And I was there for several years, about 9 years. And then St. David's came knocking in Austin, Texas. And my background in health, social determinants of health really, I guess, is what attracted them to me. And so I got a chance to go there. But ultimately, my job is my desire, my family's desire has always been to come back home, come back to North Carolina. And so the opportunity presented itself to come and be a part of the work at Dogwood. And so I came to Dogwood a little over a year ago. And was happy to do so. So it's been a kind of a full circle for me. Started here in the state, left for a little while, and being able to come back and be a part of what happens next in our home state.
And do you want to ask you a little bit more about your role at Dogwood and what are some of the parallels and non-parallels that you see there and here? But first, just kind of curious, throughout your career then in philanthropy and those things you just laid out, what are some of the do's and the don'ts that you take with you into this position that you've learned along the way?
Oh man, thank you. It's lots. So I'll start with the do's. Some of the do's are, and I've said some of those before. You have to, if you're going to be a strategic philanthropist, not just a funder, not just pushing money out the door, but if you're going to do things that are going to actually change conditions, you have to understand truly what the dynamics are in the community. You have to understand who helps things happen, what help, the organizations, the individuals. You got to weave those individuals together to be a part of the work that you do. So that's a do for me. You have to understand the networks and understand what how things happen in the community. I think another thing that I stress is that our money will never be enough money. We will not have enough to change all of the conditions that ail our community. I view philanthropy, and you have to view philanthropy this way. It's a catalyst. It can be a first in kind of player. It can be a convener. It can help lift up the issues and help people understand the importance of certain issues. And it can help to catalyze some of those things. That's another do. You got to understand what your role is. And I think the last do I'll say is organizationally. You have to reflect what you're doing externally, internally. So for me, being about listening to community, being about wanting to kind of partner with folks, you got to create a foundation and a culture inside your organization as well that reflects what you're trying to do externally, because those things can be a disconnect. You can't be an oppressive work environment and at the same time trying to improve the life and well-being of folks external to the organization. So the foundation has to be sound in its own belief about what it's trying to do for its the board and the staff as much as it's trying to do for the outside. And I think a couple of don'ts that I would raise is you got to stay away from tunnel vision. You got to stay away from kind of having internal conversations constantly, because it's not anything that people do intentionally. It's very easy when you're working inside philanthropy to kind of talk to yourselves and listen to yourselves. That's a recipe for making some missteps in your work. And so you cannot become insular in the work. And I think that's one of the biggest things that philanthropy has to be mindful of. And then I think another thing that you want to stay, we have to stay away from is the urge to try to be all things to everybody. You can't be all things to everyone. What you can be, what you can do, and it goes back to a do I talked about, is you can listen and you can share information. But the moment you try to walk a line of trying to be all things, you really gain no traction in what you're really trying to do. And so it's not going to be a benefit to anyone to try to please everyone as the organization begins to kind of set its direction. So.
Okay, and Spence and Hannah, not to ignore the both of you, I know, but I've bugged you plenty of times over the past couple of years on this. But I do want to ask you both, what was the response like with the search for this role, and what were the qualities that you were most looking for that apparently Mr. Buster filled for you guys?
Hannah? I think that our consultant told us early on is you know it when you see it. We went into this understanding the leadership skills and the experience in grant making and all the things that William brought to the table. But there is that other component that's harder to describe, and that's, is it a match? Does it feel right? And I think that this, not only did William have a lot of talent, a lot of experience, he had strength in a place where we need it the most, which is in grant making. It just felt right. It felt right. And it felt like he was part of us. We could see it. We could feel partnership immediately. And you kind of, once you experience it, you know it. And I don't know if that really comes across, or if that's an answer that makes sense. But I mean, Spence, help me here. Is that?
Well, no, I don't think you need any help. I think you've nailed it right, hit the nail right on the head. One thing we could tell from the beginning, and William alluded to it, this position got a lot of attention nationwide. I mean, this endowment and the position got a lot of attention. So we were so fortunate to get a lot of interest from nationwide, from folks in this situation. And there were so many with such strong attributes, and we just felt so fortunate that as we worked through it, Hannah's right. It really, you've heard William's background, and it just fits perfectly with what we're trying to do down here. But on top of that, and probably most important, is that fit. Is he felt like one of us, one of New Hanover's finest from day one, and I think that fit in every part of our community is so important. We feel very fortunate to have him.
William, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to add one thing that has been reinforced as we've been talking to William and others today. William is authentic, and you feel that, but it's not just words to him. When somebody has made this their life's work, and the philanthropy and service to people and communities has been his life's work, and you feel that, that's real. And I think this community, once it has a chance to get to know him, will feel it.
I hope so, Hannah. I think, but thank you very much.
So William, let's talk a little bit about your experience at Dogwood. And maybe you can explain to those who aren't as familiar what the similarities are and what the differences are between Dogwood and the New Hanover Endowment, both of them being relatively new endowments set up in the wake of a hospital sale. But I'll let you kind of fill us in on what the primary similarities and differences are.
Yeah, you began to allude to it right from the beginning. So the Health Conversion Foundation, as it's known in the industry and philanthropy, the start of saying that you have an asset in the community and a hospital by way of a hospital that truly was a community owned, whether it was the county or whether in Dogwood's perspective situation, it was a nonprofit hospital. And so that being an asset to the community, you just can't do anything you want with it. And so when you create these sales of these hospitals, the determination that from years ago that was made is that the resources have to go back to the community. In addition, and so you can do it in a number of ways. You can create foundations, you can create, kind of trusts and those kinds of things. And so the similarities there are that both were a part of a sale. The resources came from a sale of a hospital system, and now both have chosen to say that we're going to create this entity like a foundation and take our resources and impact the health and well-being of our community. I think the difference here is the structure. Dogwood is in a unique kind of partnership and a asset purchase agreement that was created between Mission Hospital and Dogwood. That there's certain things that we have to adhere to, and certain things that they have to adhere to for a number of years. Like it's very, very structured, very specific. We're not necessarily operating that way. And so it's we'll have a positive relationship with Novant, but it's not as tied the way Mission and Dogwood has to be, at least for the initial time. I think the other similarity that I would recognize is the way they've gone about listening, really trying to listen deep to the needs of the region, needs of the community. Very similar processes. We just came out of a process of we did over 30 listening sessions here over the last year here in Western North Carolina to get to the very kind of the things that Dogwood's are going to be doing over the next 3 years. We've listened at New Hanover, and we're going to do even more listening. And so I think people got to get used to me coming and asking them, and then putting action behind that. So those are the real, I think the similarities and the difference that are the biggest things that come to mind.
And we should point out at Dogwood in Western North Carolina, that covers a much larger geographic footprint, correct? Was it 18 counties?
18 counties, yes. 18 counties in Western North Carolina, yep. And
then in your role there, Senior Vice President of Impact, what does that entail, or what have you been responsible for?
So when I was asked to come here, the board here asked me to create the strategy. So they knew what they wanted to focus on, things like education and housing and economic opportunity and health. And what I did was built a team around that and saying, let's bring in the experts on the staff. Let's create the strategy that kind of weaves throughout all of it. And then let's present that back to the board and to the community, and then have some very specific metrics and outcomes and expectations over the next few years. And built a team that kind of knows how to do all of that. So that's really been my primary focus here over this first year here, was to build a team and to create the strategies and the implementation plan that we were going to operate from over the next several years.
And do you see doing something similar like that here once you get started in terms of building these teams of expertise? My first, I gotta hire just at least 1 or 2 people to begin with. So we gotta get right into figuring out what we need. So at least here, there a lot had already been done at Dogwood. We're coming into the endowment in New Hanover in a way that says we have a sense, we know what things are important to us. We know the kind of philosophies that the board has kind of set and the parameters that they've set around the things that are important to us. We need to understand what is the right staffing model that's going to help us kind of implement a lot of this. And so I'm not coming in saying I'm going to hire A, B, and C right off the bat. I don't know that yet. We need to assess. I need to understand what we're trying to do so we can apply the right type of staffing that we need to the situation. Another thing that's been mentioned on the to-do list is creating a community advisory board.
Yes.
Do you think, will that hold off until you're in place after March, or Spence and Hannah, do you foresee that getting rolling sometime soon?
We're going to start that process soon, but that's determining exactly how we make the selections. I think we'll be ready to do something after William arrives. But I think that in order for us to stay on schedule, and we've mapped this out so that we'll be ready to move money into the community at the right time, we've got to get that board in place. So that will be an important part of what happens in January and February.
Okay. Well, what will that look like? Will that be like community applications? Will that be an internal nomination process?
I think it's going to happen. It will happen in a similar way that the reserve board members did. In other words, it will be very intentional. There'll be a discussion by the full board. And then the criteria and everything will be put together within the governance committee. And I think that there will be, and I'm speculating because we have not done this, but I think that we know enough to understand that when you select 15 people, we want these to be people that will give voice to a wide range of needs. And so I imagine there'll be an online application process, but I think it's fluid.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of leads into Spence or Hannah. Is there anything else that's next up to do? I know when we talked about this at the last check-in at December's Power Breakfast, you said you're very focused on the next hurdle being getting a president CEO selected and in place. So now that's checked off. So yes, besides the community advisory board figuring that out, what else do you all have up ahead next as an endowment board?
So we'll start, when you asked me in December, boy, I wanted to say right then, if I could get my hands on this guy right that moment, we'd have one checked off. So it took us a little bit longer than we thought to get all that pulled together. But getting William on board is a huge step. And of course, he's got a transition period where it'll take a few months to get down here and get his legs up under him. But while he's doing that, we are going to move forward with our process for the community advisory group, as Hannah said. And we haven't set that process yet, but we'll start working on it at our meeting Thursday night to put those wheels in motion, because we don't want to just not continue our momentum. So we'll start working on that process, and we'll be working on that for the next couple of months. And we're also going to be working on, or at least having deep conversations, and if we can grab William's ear even before he gets here, about starting the grant criteria conversation. Now, William's going to be point and in center of that, but we want to start getting that in motion too, so that we'll be in a position at the right time later in the year to accept those grant applications. So I think those are the two things we'll be working on next.
And then William, just to end on you then, knowing that you have these details, I'm sure, imagine you also have to pack up some moving boxes, but looking at this year then, and in your new role, how would you describe what your goals are going to be?
My goals, my goals for over the first few months is to really get a deeper sense of what's happening. I can read all the reports. I've listened and I've watched the listening sessions and hours of that, and I've read everything that's been produced. But there really has to be a process of really kind of integrating yourself into the community. And so that takes the patience of asking people and listening, asking people for time with them. And so over the first few weeks and months, I'm going to do a lot of conversations. Hopefully we can knock out some of it in group conversations, but if I have to do one-on-ones and come to people's homes and offices, I'll be doing a lot of that. Another thing that I think will be, if we do this, I'll count it as a success, is creating at least the initial intake process. One of the things that is going to be critical for our community to understand is how they access these resources. You heard me talk about the black box of philanthropy. We're going to be very intentional about saying, because it's not going to be perfect, because our process is going to evolve over the years to come. But let's begin with a clear kind of application process, a clear kind of way in which you can communicate with us the things that you want to get support of, and then a clear process about how we determine what we're going to be making, how we will be making the decisions, and when we'll be telling people whether or not they've received the resources or not. So that'll be another success. And I think the last thing I'll say is understanding and creating the core team that we're going to need as a team on staff. The board, God bless them. They've been hard at work over the last several months and years. And it's time for us to kind of have a staff that are every day from morning to night that we're going to be focused on. We need that team that's going to be doing that. And so we'll be successful by the end of the year if we have that core team in place that's going to help us kind of launch some of those initial opportunities around grant making, putting some structure around the team, putting some structure around the kinds of things that we want to solicit grants for. So.
I want to thank all of you for fitting in this real quick introduction, William, today on the day of your announcement. I appreciate it. I know there's going to be ad nauseum number of more questions for you ahead once you get here that we'll be asking. I want to thank all of you for tuning in at this special time that we're doing this today. And also, if you were missing that, also thank our reporter, Johanna Still, who, well, besides helping with some of these questions, sent out the breaking news alert today about the announcement, which if you did not receive, you should by signing up to be a Business Journal recipient of our newsletters, and then you will be in the know on things such as the appointment of the new endowment CEO. You can also catch up with this and coverage of the news at today's 4 o'clock newsletter email, which is going out soon, or on previous Wilmington Biz Talk podcasts at WilmingtonBizTalk.com or your favorite podcast streaming platform. We're going to be back next week at our usual date and time on Thursday at noon. Next week, we are slated to catch up with Chris Coudray and county officials about the slate of projects that they're working on this year, from Project Grace to the Government Center, but a larger major construction activity that the county's working on, and a look ahead for them as well. So tune in for that next Thursday, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.